I'm Batya Ungar-Sargon. Leland has the night off. President Trump is planning to do the very thing he promised to end in American politics once and for all. Tonight, Steve Cortes and David Drucker on the push to prosecute former President Barack Obama. Chris Hahn and Vince Coglianese on why we still haven't heard from Ghislaine Maxwell. Plus, Brian Entin gives us an inside look at the prison where Bryan Kohberger will spend the rest of his life. But we begin tonight with breaking news. President Trump just announced a major trade deal between the United States and Japan. Tokyo is expected to invest $550 billion in the United States in exchange for a 10% reduction to their tariff rate. The White House also claims to have reached deals with the Philippines and Indonesia. These are three huge wins for the president, which makes the other big story of the day even more disappointing. President Trump doubled down on his attacks on his predecessor.
Barack Hussein Obama led a group of people and they cheated in the elections, and they cheated without question. Obama and a group of thugs cheated on the elections. They cheated violently, viciously on the elections. They're violent people.
The president also said Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard will release more documents tomorrow. The president's comments come just hours after Trump accused Obama of treason, and he flat out said prosecutions could be coming soon.
It's time to start, after what they did to me, and whether it's right or wrong, it's time to go after people. Obama's been caught directly.
It's really a shocking statement from a man who's dealt with decades of politically motivated attacks from the Washington establishment. From the moment Donald Trump descended that golden escalator in 2015, Democrats and the intelligence community in Washington tried over and over again to disqualify Trump politically, or even worse, to put him behind bars. They spied on his campaign and accused him of colluding with Russia. They impeached him twice. They indicted him 4 times. They accused him of being a threat to democracy and suppressed damaging information about his political opponents. They raided his home. They tried to shutter his businesses. And when none of it worked, they tried to bar him from running for office again. So it's no wonder that one of the president's key campaign promises this cycle was to end the weaponization of government.
But the most important step in truly draining the swamp is to end the weaponization of the Justice Department and the abuse of law enforcement. It's been weaponized like it's never been. This is for third world countries.
The vicious, violent, and unfair weaponization of the Justice Department and our government will end.
This promise was popular, and it was not just popular with his base. So why is the president talking about going after one of his political adversaries?
It's there. He's guilty. This was treason. This was every word you can think of. They tried to steal the election. They tried to obfuscate the election. They did things that nobody's ever even imagined.
What's particularly galling about this is that the Democrats resorted to lawfare against Trump because they saw him rising in popularity. They worried that they couldn't beat him at the ballot box. That's definitely how Trump and his supporters saw it. The Democrats saw the writing on the wall. They saw working class Americans of all races abandoning them for the MAGA movement. Trump was unifying people across party lines around his socially moderate, economically populist, anti-war agenda. That is where his energies should be now. Now, of course, if Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard uncovers new information that proves a conspiracy by the Obama administration, then yes, of course, the people responsible should be held accountable. But calling President Obama a traitor?
We found absolute, this isn't like evidence, or this is like proof, irrefutable proof that Obama was seditious, that Obama was trying to lead a coup.
At this stage of what we know, that's exactly the kind of divisive rhetoric that was used against Trump. And in my opinion, it's beneath the president. Obama's office issued a rare response to the president's claims. Quote, "These bizarre allegations are ridiculous and a weak attempt at distraction. Nothing in the document issued last week undercuts the widely accepted conclusion that Russia worked to influence the 2016 presidential election, but did not successfully manipulate any votes." Now, critics of the president claim that he only made these comments to distract from the Epstein case, and politically speaking, it might have worked. That is, until Republicans in the House poured gasoline on the smoldering fire that is the Epstein story. House Speaker Mike Johnson started the August recess early in an effort to block a vote to release the Epstein files, a move that's splintering Republicans. They're caught between Trump's insistence that there's nothing more to uncover and then demands from MAGA influencers to release all the government files on the case.
It is an absolute failure to ask us to vote on a September 30th CR.
Look, the American people deserve it, and there's a lot of interest in it.
We need to be more transparent to the American people.
There are hundreds of pages of documents. There are plea deals. There are agreements we don't know about. Let's air all of this out.
And yet, polling shows that the grassroots of the MAGA movement, the millions of middle and working class Americans who trusted President Trump with their vote and elected him president, do not care about Jeffrey Epstein. Instead of trying to distract the influencers with divisive talk of treason, President Trump should get back to his agenda and unite the country around the things that we all want: affordable housing and groceries, safe streets, peace treaties, and the American dream for the hardest working Americans. Here to discuss is David Drucker, senior writer for The Dispatch, and Steve Cortes, a former senior advisor to President Trump. Welcome to you both. Thank you so much for joining us. Let me start with you, Steve. Am I wrong?
Yes, unfortunately, you are wrong, Batya, and I normally agree with you, but not in this case. Look, here's the thing. What we now know, many of us suspected this, but we now know with documentary evidence, is that Obama and his senior national security team, including Clapper and Brennan and Comey, they concocted a totally fake, made-up, dishonest hoax plot against President Trump. They then sent Comey on January 6th of 2017. That is the real tragedy of a January 6th. They sent him to Trump Tower to try to trick and trap the president-elect into a false confession, because they knew that claiming that American intelligence had unearthed evidence of collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign, they knew that it was a malicious lie. And yet they gave it the full stamp of approval of the intelligence community of the United States. That is weaponizing government in a plot to try to undermine the will of the people and to try to usurp the will of the people by tricking the president-elect into some sort of dubious false confession. They then furthered that once Trump took office, because they leaked those documents and that information to the media, to friendly media, particularly at CNN. So when Donald Trump uncovers evidence of the plotters and says, we are going to punish the plotters, the criminal plotters, that's not weaponization. It's not weaponization when you say that those who previously weaponized and lied, that we're going to hold them accountable. That's simply justice and accountability. And if America stands for anything, it stands for those principles.
But Steve, let me play you a clip of the president. This is something that he said while he was running that I think for a lot of Americans, myself included, was very moving. Take a look at this.
My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker and unifier. That's what I want to be, a peacemaker and a unifier.
I mean, David, is this the actions of a peacemaker and a unifier?
Yeah, but Donald Trump's never been a peacemaker. Well, let's leave foreign policy out of it. He's never been a unifier. It's not his style. And even when you ask him about unifying the country and what he's going to do to bring unity about, he's always talked about success, economic success, prosperity, that will unify the country. He doesn't talk about himself as a unifying figure, and he's just simply not.
Steve, you know, he had these huge victories today, these 3 trade deals, and instead of that being sort of the top story of the day, we're all sitting here talking about him calling President Obama a traitor. Is that not a missed opportunity to talk about the kind of economic prosperity that he really actually is bringing into the country, and yet somehow the American people don't know about it because all we talk about are these kinds of, you know, flame wars?
Well, Batya, I think they do know because they realize their own financial situation, that real wages are rising dramatically, the exact opposite of what happened during the tragedy of Bidenomics. But look, we can't unify around a false premise, meaning we can't pretend that these crimes didn't occur. And these aren't minor crimes. We're talking about crimes that rise to the highest levels of abuse of power, perhaps in all of American history, when you have the director of the CIA, the director of the FBI, acting in cahoots with the full knowledge and awareness of the President of the United States, acting against his successor and trying to insert effectively a poison pill, a dishonest trap to be sprung against President Trump, either as president-elect or once in office. If we were to pretend that that didn't happen and say, for the sake of unity, we're going to ignore it, then we would not be just in any sense. And here's the even bigger risk if we were to ignore it, is it will happen again at some point. If the plotters get away with it, and they have so far, if they get away with it, they're going to do it again. The only way that we smash the administrative state in this country, which has been so abusive to the American people, the only way is going to be with very senior officials ending up in handcuffs. That is a necessity, and I believe that this evidence is going to lead there. Now, we need to do it with due process, in a methodical manner, respecting the rights of those who are likely to soon be accused, officially accused, in a court of law. But I think those of us who are watching as political observers and as just people of logic, again, we've long suspected that this was the case. We now have the evidence, thanks to Tulsi Gabbard, and I commend her for having the bravery and guts to make sure that we have full transparency. You know, there's nothing unifying about obfuscation. There's nothing unifying about saying, we're just going to pretend that these facts don't exist.
Doubt.
No, they do exist.
No doubt.
And we need to know the full truth.
I think probably we all agree that there are certain things that could come out on this subject that would make us think that, you know, prosecutions are in order. Do you, David, believe that this has risen to that level yet?
Look, I don't think we've seen any evidence that this rises to that level. But politically, this is exactly how Democrats feel about Donald Trump. They didn't bring the investigation into January 6th just to get him. They thought that what he did was wrong and that if it wasn't exposed, it would happen again. The documents case in particular, let's leave the New York case out of it. That was a big sham. But the documents case where he took documents the end of his presidency, wouldn't give them back. They belonged in the archives. And you look at the indictment and all of the things that went on there from the perspective of the Democrats, that was wrong. And if you don't punish it, it will happen again. So both sides can continue to argue that we're right and the other side is wrong. By the way, all of these indictments were brought. A lot of facts actually lined up with the indictments, and Republicans didn't buy it. You bring these cases against all of the so-called conspirators, and I guarantee you, Democrats aren't going to buy it. It might be the right thing to do. It might be the wrong thing to do. It might have been wrong to go after Donald Trump. It might have been right to go after Donald Trump. Republicans didn't buy it. Democrats won't buy it, and we're going to continue to go on this hamster wheel.
Right, instead of unifying the country
David,
around
listen, when
great
you say,
policy. Very, very briefly, Steve.
David, when you say so-called conspirators, how else do you explain the fact that the president's daily briefing determined via the intelligence community that there was no Russian collusion with the Trump campaign, and then that was completely reversed by Clapper, Brennan, with the full participation of Obama, to say 180 degrees the exact opposite, and that in fact there was collusion? That's a conspiracy.
I don't think we've seen any evidence to bear that out. If we end up seeing evidence to bear it out, so be it. During the Russia investigation, people were convinced that Donald Trump colluded. We never saw any evidence to bear that out. The investigation ultimately did bear out that there was no collusion. And so people just have varying opinions. I'm commenting on the politics of this in particular. Nobody is going to buy it if they don't like who is being brought on trial.
We got to leave it there. Thank you both so much for joining us. What a great conversation.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.